The woman's body lay crumpled in the snowdrift like a discarded rag doll, her dark hair splayed across the white powder in stark contrast. And Ryder Vaughn knew in that instant his quiet Montana morning had just changed everything. He dropped his coffee cup without thinking, the hot liquid splashing across the wooden floorboards of his modest ranch house as he bolted for the door. The winter dawn painted everything in shades of pale blue and gray, the snow still falling in lazy spirals from a sky that promised no mercy. His boots crunched through the fresh powder as he ran, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air, his heart hammering against his ribs with an urgency he could not explain. She was not moving. That was the first thing that sent ice through his veins, colder than the Montana winter surrounding them. Ryder fell to his knees beside her, his rough hands surprisingly gentle as he turned her over, brushing snow from her pale face. She was young, maybe 22 or 23, with delicate features that spoke of someone who had known better days than this. Her lips held a bluish tinge that made his stomach clench with fear. "Come on now," he murmured, gathering her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel how her body shivered even in unconsciousness, fighting against the cold that wanted to claim her. "Stay with me." Ryder stood, cradling her against his chest, and ran back toward his house. The distance that had seemed so short moments ago now felt like miles. His muscles burned with effort, but he pushed harder, taking the porch steps 2 at a time and kicking the door open with more force than necessary. The warmth of the house hit them like a wave. Ryder carried her straight to the fireplace, laying her carefully on the thick bearskin rug he kept there. The fire had burned down to embers during the night, and he worked frantically to build it back up, feeding split logs into the hearth until flames crackled and danced, throwing golden light across her still form. Her clothes were soaked through, and Ryder knew leaving her in them would do more harm than good. He grabbed blankets from his bedroom, working with clinical efficiency to strip away the wet fabric and wrap her in dry wool. His hands shook slightly, not from the cold or exertion, but from something else entirely. Even half frozen and unconscious, there was something about her that struck him deep in his chest, a recognition that felt impossible and inevitable all at once. He rubbed her hands between his own, trying to warm them, talking to her in a low, steady voice. "You are going to be fine. I have got you now. You are safe here." Minutes stretched into an eternity before her eyelids finally fluttered. Ryder leaned closer, his heart leaping. "That is it. Come back now." Her eyes opened slowly, revealing irises the color of spring grass, bright and startling against her pale skin. For a moment she stared at him without comprehension, then panic flooded her features and she tried to sit up, tried to scramble away from him. "Easy, easy," Ryder said, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. "You are safe. I found you in the snow. You collapsed in my front yard at dawn." She pulled the blankets tighter around herself, her eyes darting around the room, taking in the rough-hewn furniture, the sturdy walls, the rifle mounted above the door. When her gaze returned to him, suspicion warred with desperation in her expression. "Where am I?" Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper, raw and damaged from the cold. "My ranch, about 5 miles outside Columbia, Montana. Name is Ryder Vaughn." He kept his distance, settling back on his heels to give her space. "What is yours?" She hesitated, and he watched her decide whether to trust him. Stella Garrett." "Well, Miss Garrett, you picked a hell of a morning for a walk. Temperature has not been above freezing for 3 days straight." He kept his tone light, conversational, trying to ease the fear he could see in every line of her body. "Can you tell me what happened? How you ended up half dead in a snowdrift?" Tears welled in her eyes and she blinked them back fiercely. "I was running. I have been running for 2 days. I did not mean to stop, but I just could not go any further. Ryder felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and protective. Running from what? Not what. Who? She took a shuddering breath. My stepfather. He has been trying to marry me off to his business partner, a man 3 times my age who already buried 2 wives. I refused, so he locked me in my room and said I had no choice. I climbed out the window in the middle of the night, took his horse, and rode as far as I could before the animal went lame. I have been on foot since yesterday morning. Where did you come from? Virginia City. I thought I could make it to Helena, find work there, start over. She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. I did not account for the storm or my own weakness. Ryder shook his head. Virginia City is 40 miles from here. You crossed the mountains on foot in a blizzard with no supplies. I had supplies when I started. A saddlebag with food and a little money. But when the horse foundered, I had to leave everything behind. I could not carry it all. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I am so tired. I just wanted to rest for a moment, just close my eyes for a few minutes. He knew what that meant. If he had not been awake, if he had not been standing at his window with his morning coffee watching the snow fall, she would have died. The thought made something twist painfully in his chest. You are safe now, he said firmly. Your stepfather does not know where you are, and even if he did, he would have to go through me to get to you. She looked at him with those green eyes, searching his face for something. Why would you help me? You do not know me. Ryder met her gaze steadily. Because it is the right thing to do. And because nobody deserves to be forced into a life they do not want. He stood, moving toward the kitchen. Let me get you something hot to drink, some food. You need to warm up from the inside. As he prepared coffee and heated leftover stew from the night before, Ryder found his hands were still shaking slightly. He had been alone on this ranch for 3 years, ever since his father died and left him the land and the small herd of cattle they ran. He was 26 years old, and in that time he had built a life that was simple and solitary. He liked it that way, or so he had told himself. But something about Stella Garrett, huddled in blankets by his fireplace, made him realize how empty his house had been. When he returned with the food, she drank the coffee gratefully, wrapping her hands around the tin cup as if it were precious. She managed a few bites of stew before exhaustion overtook her again. You need to sleep, Ryder said gently. Real sleep in a proper bed. Come on. He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. She was small next to him, the top of her head barely reaching his shoulder. He guided her to his bedroom, the only real bedroom in the small house, and helped her sit on the edge of the bed. I cannot take your bed, she protested weakly. You can and you will. I will be fine on the couch. He pulled the heavy quilts up around her as she lay down. Sleep as long as you need. You are safe here, Stella. I promise. She was asleep before he finished speaking, her breathing evening out into the deep rhythm of true rest. Ryder stood there for a moment, looking down at her. Dark hair fanned across his pillow, her face finally peaceful in sleep. Something had shifted in his world, a fundamental change he could not yet name but felt deep in his bones. The storm continued for 2 more days, the snow piling high against the house and barn. Ryder went about his chores with mechanical efficiency, tending to his horses and the cattle he kept close to the house in winter, making sure everything was secure. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the woman sleeping in his bed. Stella woke periodically, and each time he fed her, made sure she drank water, watched the color slowly return to her cheeks. They talked in fragments, sharing pieces of their stories. He learned that her mother had died when she was 16, leaving her in the care of a stepfather who saw her as property to be traded. She learned that Ryder had been born on this land. that his mother had died in childbirth when he was 10, that his father had taught him everything about ranching and horses and surviving in the harsh Montana wilderness before a winter fever took him 3 years back. On the third day, Stella finally emerged from the bedroom under her own power, wearing one of Ryder's old shirts and a pair of his trousers that she had to roll up several times to keep from tripping. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she moved carefully, still weak but determined. "I cannot keep sleeping while you do all the work," she said, watching him prepare breakfast. "You were half dead 4 days ago. You are allowed to rest." But he smiled as he said it, pleased to see her up and moving. "I am stronger than I look." She moved to stand beside him at the stove. "My mother taught me to cook before she died. Let me help." They worked together in the small kitchen, and Ryder found himself hyper-aware of every accidental brush of their hands, every moment when she leaned close to reach for something. She smelled like his soap now, clean and simple, but underneath it was something that was entirely her own. Over breakfast, she asked him about the ranch, and he found himself talking more than he had in months, telling her about his plans to expand the herd come spring, about the challenges of running a place like this alone, about the quiet satisfaction of building something with his own 2 hands. "It sounds wonderful," she said softly, "to have a place that is truly yours where nobody can tell you what to do or who to be." "Is that what you want?" Ryder asked. "Freedom. I want a life I choose," Stella said, her green eyes fierce. "I want to wake up every morning and know that the day ahead is mine to shape. Is that too much to ask?" "No," he said, and meant it. "It is not too much at all." The days began to blur together in a way that felt both strange and natural. The storm passed, leaving the world buried in white, the sky a brilliant blue that hurt to look at. Stella grew stronger, insisting on helping with the housework, cooking meals that were far better than anything Ryder had managed on his own. She had a quick laugh and a sharp mind, and he found himself looking for excuses to stay in the house rather than going out to work. They talked for hours by the fireplace in the evenings, sharing stories and dreams. She told him about the books she loved, about her secret hope to maybe teach school someday. He told her about the wild horses he sometimes saw running in the high country, about his dream of catching and training them. The space between them seemed to shrink with each passing day, an invisible thread drawing them closer. 2 weeks after he found her in the snow, Ryder woke on the couch to find Stella sitting by the window, staring out at the winter landscape. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting everything in shades of pink and gold. "Could not sleep?" he asked, sitting up. She turned to look at him, and there was something troubled in her expression. "I have been thinking. I cannot stay here forever, Ryder. I need to move on, find work, make a life for myself." The words hit him like a physical blow, though he had known they were coming. Of course she could not stay. This was his house, his land. She had her own path to walk. "I understand," he said, though the words felt like glass in his throat. "If you want to go to Helena like you planned, I can take you there. The roads should be clear enough in another week or so." "Is that what you want?" she asked, her voice very quiet. "For me to go?" Ryder crossed to where she sat, kneeling beside her chair so he could look up into her face. "What I want," he said carefully, "is for you to be happy. If going to Helena and starting fresh there is what will make you happy, then that is what we will do." And if I said I did not want to go? Her eyes were bright with something that made his heart race. "If I said that these past 2 weeks have been the happiest I have ever been, that the thought of leaving makes me want to cry, what would you say then?" He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. "I would say that I have been trying not to fall in love with you since the moment you opened your eyes and looked at me. I would say that you have made this house feel like a home again, and that the thought of you leaving tears me apart inside." "Ryder," she breathed. And then she was leaning down and he was rising up, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at once. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Stella rested her forehead against his. "I do not want to be a burden to you. I do not want you to feel obligated because you saved my life." "You are not a burden," he said fiercely. "You are the best thing that has happened to me in longer than I can remember, but I need you to be sure, Stella. This is a hard life out here. The winters are brutal, the work never ends, and it can be lonely as hell sometimes." "It will not be lonely if we are together," she said simply. "And I am not afraid of hard work. I am only afraid of losing you." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and when they came up for air he was grinning like a fool. "Does this mean you will stay, really stay, as more than just a guest?" "Yes," she said, laughing. "Yes, you stubborn cowboy, I will stay." The weeks that followed were a revelation. They worked side by side during the day, and in the evenings they sat together by the fire, sometimes talking, sometimes simply existing in comfortable silence. They learned the rhythms of each other, the small gestures and habits that made up a shared life. Ryder taught Stella to ride his gentlest mare, and her laughter as she finally managed a full circuit of the corral was the sweetest sound he had ever heard. She taught him that a house could be more than just a place to sleep and eat, filling it with small touches that made it warmer, more alive. They kissed often, stolen moments throughout the day, longer explorations in the evenings that left them both breathless and wanting more. But Ryder was careful, conscious of propriety, and of not pushing her faster than she was ready to go. He wanted to do this right. On a clear day in early March, with the first hints of spring beginning to show in the longer days and the occasional patch of bare ground, Ryder rode into Columbia. It was a rough mining town, not much more than a collection of buildings clustered along a single street, but it had what he needed. He returned at sunset and found Stella in the kitchen, preparing dinner. She smiled when he came in, and the sight of her there in his home still made his breath catch. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Stella wiped her hands on her apron, her eyes curious. When she opened the box, her breath caught. Inside was a simple gold band, nothing fancy, but it caught the lamplight and gleamed warm and precious. "I know we have not known each other long," Ryder said, his voice rough with emotion. "And I know this is probably too fast, too soon. But I also know that I love you, Stella Garrett. I love your strength and your courage and your kindness. I love the way you laugh and the way you look at me like I am someone worth looking at. I want to spend the rest of my life with you if you will have me. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling, that brilliant smile that lit up her whole face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was lifting her up and spinning her around, both of them laughing like children. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, pouring everything he felt into that kiss. They were married a week later by the circuit preacher who happened to be passing through Columbia. It was a simple ceremony, witnessed by a handful of townspeople Ryder knew from buying supplies. Stella wore a dress they had ordered from the general store, simple blue cotton that matched her eyes, and she had never looked more beautiful. The wedding night was a revelation of its own, a tender exploration of each other that left them both awed and transformed. Ryder had known physical desire before, but this was different, deeper. This was about connection and trust, and the merging of two lives into one shared path forward. As spring unfurled across the Montana landscape, they worked together to make the ranch thrive. Stella proved to have a natural way with animals, gentling the horses with patience and soft words. She started a vegetable garden near the house, turning over the soil with determination, planning for the summer harvest. Ryder expanded his operations, using the money his father had left him to buy more cattle, to repair and improve the barn and outbuildings. With Stella beside him, everything seemed possible. The work was still hard, the days still long, but coming home to her at the end of each day made it all worthwhile. In late spring, a stranger rode up to the ranch. Ryder saw him coming from the north pasture and felt a prickle of unease. Stella was at the house, and he urged his horse into a gallop, needing to get there first. The man who dismounted in front of their porch was middle-aged and well-dressed, with cold eyes that catalogued everything they saw. Ryder recognized the type immediately, a man who saw the world in terms of what he could take from it. "Can I help you?" Ryder asked, keeping his voice neutral as he rode up. "I am looking for a girl," the man said. "Stella Garrett. I have reason to believe she might have come through this area." Behind the man, the door to the house opened and Stella stepped out. She had gone pale, but her chin was up, her shoulders squared. "Hello, Gerald." The man turned and something unpleasant flickered across his face. "Stella, your stepfather has been very worried about you." "I doubt that," she said coldly. "What do you want? To bring you home, of course, where you belong." Gerald's smile did not reach his eyes. "You have caused a great deal of trouble running off like that, but if you come back now, I am sure we can smooth things over. Our arrangement can still proceed." "I am not going anywhere with you," Stella said. "I am home. This is where I belong now." Ryder dismounted, moving to stand beside his wife. "The lady has made her position clear. I think you should leave." Gerald looked between them and his expression hardened. "You married her, a rancher with dirt under his fingernails. Stella, do not be a fool. I can give you a life of comfort, of society." "You can give me a prison," Stella shot back. "A life where I have no say, no freedom, nothing but pretty cages. I would rather die than go back to that." "Your stepfather is your legal guardian until you are 25, Gerald said. "He has the law on his side. You can come willingly, or I can involve the authorities." Ryder felt rage boil up inside him, but he kept his voice steady. "She is married now. That changes things legally. She is my wife, and that means she is under my protection, not her stepfather's." Gerald's eyes narrowed. "You think marriage will protect her? I can have that annulled." "A hasty marriage to a nobody from Montana. No court would uphold it." "Try it," Ryder said, his voice going soft and dangerous. "But I should warn you, we are a long way from any court here, and in Montana we handle things our own way." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Finally, Gerald stepped back, his hand moving toward his coat. Ryder's hand went to his gun faster than thought. "I would not do that if I were you," Ryder said quietly. Gerald froze, then carefully moved his hand away. "This is not over." "Yes," Stella said, her voice ringing with conviction. "It is. Go back to Virginia City. Tell my stepfather that I am never coming back. I have made my choice and I choose this life with this man. If he has a problem with that, he can come here himself and try to change my mind. But I promise you, he will fail." Gerald looked at her for a long moment, and something like respect flickered in his eyes. Then he mounted his horse and rode away without another word. When he was out of sight, Stella turned to Ryder, and he saw that she was shaking. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "He could come back," she whispered against his chest. "He could bring the law or hired men or worse." "Let him try," Ryder said. "You are my wife, Stella. That means something here. And I am not the only rancher in these parts who does not take kindly to outsiders coming in and trying to bully folk. If he comes back, he will find more resistance than he bargained for." Over the next few weeks, Ryder quietly spread the word to his neighbors, men who had helped his father and who respected the Vaughn name. They all agreed to keep an eye out, to stand together if Gerald or anyone else came looking for trouble. But as the weeks passed, and no one came, the tension began to ease. Spring turned to summer and the ranch flourished. Stella's garden produced abundantly, and she canned vegetables for the winter with fierce concentration. Ryder's cattle herd grew, and he made good money selling beef to the mining camps and towns scattered across the territory. They fell into the rhythms of married life, learning each other's moods and needs. They argued sometimes, usually about small things, but they learned how to fight fair and how to make up properly. And they loved each other with an intensity that never seemed to fade, finding joy in both the grand gestures and the small, everyday moments. In late summer, Stella began to feel ill in the mornings. At first she dismissed it, but when the pattern continued for 2 weeks, she began to suspect. When she told Ryder her suspicions, he stared at her for a long moment before letting out a whoop of joy that probably scared the horses in the barn. "A baby," he said, picking her up and spinning her around. "We are going to have a baby. Careful," she laughed, dizzy and delighted. "You are going to make me sick again." He set her down gently, his hands going to her still flat stomach with wonder. "I am going to be a father." "You are going to be a wonderful father," she said, covering his hands with hers. "This baby is going to be so loved." The pregnancy progressed well, though Stella found the morning sickness challenging. Ryder hovered over her like a worried hen, which she found both exasperating and endearing. He insisted on doing more of the heavy work, even though she insisted she was perfectly capable. As autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, Stella's belly began to swell noticeably. Ryder would spend his evenings with his hand on her stomach, marveling at every kick and flutter. "I think he is going to be a fighter," Ryder said one evening, feeling a particularly strong kick. Stella raised an eyebrow. "What makes you so sure it is a boy?" "Just a feeling," Ryder said, grinning. "But boy or girl, as long as the baby is healthy and you are safe, that is all that matters." Winter came early that year, the first snow falling in mid-November. Stella was large and uncomfortable now, but her face glowed with health and happiness. The woman who had collapsed in a snowdrift the previous winter was gone, replaced by someone confident and strong and deeply content. On a bitter cold night in early February, Stella woke Ryder with a hand on his shoulder. "It is time," she said, her voice calm despite the pain he could see in her eyes. Ryder had prepared for this moment, but his hand still shook as he helped her out of bed. He had convinced old Mrs. Patterson from the neighboring ranch to come stay with them as Stella's due date approached, and he thanked God for that foresight now, as the older woman took charge with brisk efficiency. The labor was long and difficult. Ryder paced the main room like a caged animal, flinching every time he heard Stella cry out. He had faced down dangerous animals, harsh weather, and threatening men without flinching, but this terrified him in a way nothing else ever had. Finally, as dawn broke over the snow-covered mountains, he heard a different sound, the thin, angry wail of a newborn. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the bedroom, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said, "and your wife is asking for you." Ryder bolted for the bedroom. Stella was propped up against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face exhausted but radiant. In her arms was a tiny bundle, and when Ryder approached, she pulled back the blanket to reveal a red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair. "Meet your son," she said softly. Ryder sat carefully on the edge of the bed, reaching out with one finger to touch the baby's impossibly small hand. Tiny fingers curled around his, gripping with surprising strength, and Ryder felt his vision blur with tears. "He is perfect," he whispered. "You are both perfect." They named him Samuel, after Ryder's father. Little Sam proved to have healthy lungs and a strong will, keeping them up at all hours those first few weeks. But Ryder did not mind the sleepless nights, marveling at every yawn and stretch and tiny noise his son made. Stella proved to be a natural mother, patient and tender even when exhausted. Watching her with Sam, Ryder fell in love with her all over again, deeper than ever before. Spring came again, the third since that dawn when Ryder had seen a figure in the snow and run without thinking. As the snow melted and green began to show on the hillsides, they took Sam outside for the first time, letting him feel the sun on his face. "Can you believe it has only been a year and a half?" Stella asked, standing beside Ryder on the porch, Sam cradled in her arms. "Sometimes it feels like I have been here forever, like my old life was just a dream." "A nightmare, you mean," Ryder said, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Maybe," she conceded, "but it led me here to you, so I cannot regret it entirely." That summer, a letter arrived from Virginia City. Stella opened it with trembling hands and Ryder stood close, ready to comfort her. But as she read, her expression shifted from fear to relief. "My stepfather is dead," she said quietly. "He had a heart attack in his office 3 months ago." She looked up at Ryder. "I am free." "Truly, completely free." "You have been free since the day you opened your eyes in front of my fire," Ryder said, "but I am glad you never have to look over your shoulder again." She burned the letter in the fireplace, watching the paper curl and blacken. "That part of my life is over," she said. "This is my life now. You, Sam, this ranch, this future we are building together. This is what matters." The years rolled on, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The ranch continued to grow and prosper under their careful stewardship. They added onto the house, building proper rooms for their growing family. 2 years after Sam came a daughter they named Rose, who had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn chin. 3 years after that came another boy, James, who was quieter than his siblings but had a way with animals that amazed everyone. Stella never did become a schoolteacher in the traditional sense, but she taught all 3 children to read and write and think critically about the world around them. Ryder taught them to ride and rope and care for the land that would one day be theirs. On winter evenings, the family would gather by the fireplace, and sometimes Stella would tell the children the story of how she and Ryder met. She would describe the blizzard, the exhaustion, the moment she collapsed in the snow. She would tell them how their father had seen her from the window and ran to save her life. "If he had not been looking out the window at that exact moment," she would say, "none of you would be here. Sometimes I think fate was at work that day, bringing me to this exact place at the exact moment when he would see me." "I do not think it was fate," Ryder would always say, pulling her close. "I think it was you, fighting to survive long enough to find your way here. You saved yourself, Stella. I just happened to be the one lucky enough to be waiting at the other end." The children grew and thrived, as wild and free as the Montana landscape around them. Sam grew into a young man who shared his father's love of horses and his mother's sharp mind. Rose proved to have a gift for music, learning to play the piano Ryder bought from a traveling merchant when she was 10. James, true to his early promise, could calm the most skittish horse with nothing but patience and soft words. As Ryder and Stella grew older, their love did not diminish but rather deepened, the way a river carves its channel deeper over time. They knew each other's thoughts, could communicate with a glance, moved through their days in the easy synchronicity of 2 people who have become one. On the 20th anniversary of that winter morning when Ryder had seen Stella in the snow, they stood together on the porch at dawn, watching the sun rise over the mountains. The house behind them was full of noise and life, their 3 children and now 2 grandchildren filling it with laughter. "Do you ever regret it?" Ryder asked, the same question he had asked many times over the years. "Choosing this life, this remote ranch, instead of the society life you might have had?" Stella turned to him, her face lined now with age but still beautiful in his eyes. "I have never regretted it for even a moment," she said firmly. "You gave me more than your name or your protection that day, Ryder. You gave me a life worth living. You gave me love and freedom and a home where I could finally be myself. How could I ever regret that?" He kissed her soft and sweet, a promise renewed. "I love you, Stella Vaughn. From that first moment until my last breath, it will always be you." "And I love you," she said, leaning into his embrace. "My cowboy, my rescuer, my best friend, my love, always and forever." As the sun rose higher, painting the snow-covered mountains in shades of rose and gold, they stood together on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the family they had created, living the life they had chosen. The morning was cold, the air crisp and clean, and somewhere in the distance a hawk cried out as it rode the thermal currents above the valley. It was a perfect morning, one of thousands they had shared and thousands more they would share before their time was done. And if Ryder's mind sometimes drifted back to that dawn when he had stood in this same spot with his coffee, looking out at the snow and seeing a dark shape that had changed his life forever, he only smiled. Some moments were meant to change everything. Some people were meant to find each other, no matter how unlikely the circumstances. He had run toward her that day without thinking, acting on instinct and humanity. He had saved her life. But in return, she had saved his in all the ways that truly mattered, turning his house into a home, his solitude into companionship, his existence into a life truly lived. The children's voices called from inside, Rose yelling something about breakfast being ready, James laughing at something Sam said. Stella squeezed Ryder's hand and turned toward the door, and he followed her inside, into the warmth and chaos and love that filled every corner of their home. This was his legacy, he thought, watching his family gather around the table. Not just the land or the cattle or the ranch that bore his name, but these people, these connections forged through love and choice and the simple decision to run towards someone who needed help instead of looking away. Every moment had led to this, every choice and chance and blessing building on the ones that came before. As they sat down to eat, Sam's oldest boy on his lap, Rose passing plates, James pouring coffee, Stella smiling at him from across the table, Ryder felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. Life was not always easy, not even here in this place they loved. There would be hard times ahead still, losses to weather, challenges to face. But they would face them together, this family forged from snow and courage and love. Outside, the Montana winter held the land in its grip, but inside there was only warmth and light and the sound of people who loved each other simply being together. It was more than Ryder had ever dreamed of in those lonely years before Stella. It was everything. And later, when the meal was done and the children had dispersed to their tasks, when it was just the two of them again for a quiet moment, Ryder took Stella's hand and pulled her close, dancing with her in the kitchen to music only they could hear. Her head rested against his chest, right over his heart, and he breathed in the scent of her hair, still marveling after all these years that she was his, that they had found each other against all odds. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "For what?" she asked, her voice soft. "For collapsing in my front yard that morning, for being stubborn enough to survive until I found you, for staying, for loving me, for building this life with me, for everything." She pulled back to look up at him, her green eyes bright with tears and joy. "I would do it all again," she said. "Every frozen step, every moment of fear and exhaustion, all of it. Because it brought me here to you, to this. And that makes it all worthwhile." They kissed there in the kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of breakfast and the echoes of family, and it felt like the first kiss and the 1,000th kiss all at once. It felt like coming home and starting an adventure. It felt like everything that mattered. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and persistent, blanketing the world in white. But inside, there was only love and warmth and the certain knowledge that they had found in each other exactly what they had been searching for all along. They had found home. They had found family. They had found each other. And as the winter day stretched on, filled with the ordinary miracles of life lived in love, Ryder and Stella moved through it together, hand in hand, heart to heart, exactly as they had been since that dawn when he had looked out his window and seen her in the snow and made the choice that changed everything. The choice to run, the choice to save her, the choice that had, in the end, saved them both.